On November 28, 2023, Speaker of the House Mike Johnson lit a Christmas tree. But this was no ordinary Christmas tree. This was the Capitol Christmas tree, the People's Tree. Adorning the west lawn of the United States Capitol building, the People's Tree is a 63-foot tall Norway spruce cut from the Monongahela National Forest in West Virginia. It's decorated with thousands of lights and ornaments, and thousands of people come to see it, and there's an official lighting ceremony. It's much like other famous Christmas trees in this way, with the pomp and circumstance, the pageantry, the festivities. It's a classic holiday symbol of cheer, of joy, of celebration. And yet, the People's Tree is also a symbol of something else: the significance of America's public lands. I mentioned that this year's tree was cut from the Monongahela National Forest in West Virginia, but in reality, a different national forest is chosen each and every year to provide the People's Tree. Since 1970, 24 different states and 41 different national forests have had this honor. And all of the hard work, coordination, logistics, and yes, the pageantry that go into setting up the People's Tree each year, for me, really underscores the importance of places like national forests. The entire process is literally years in the making and requires the cooperation of thousands of people to manage a resource produced on America's public lands so that we can enjoy it and celebrate it for 1 month every year. The People's Tree, then, as much as it's a celebration and symbol of the holidays, it's also a celebration and symbol of public lands. So without further ado, let's take a look at the People's Tree. All right, everyone, happy holidays and welcome to the final National Park Diaries episode of the year. Before we dive into this story fully, I do just want to give you all a huge shout out, a huge thank you for watching this year. I continue to be amazed at the amount of people that love parks and are interested in learning about them here on the internet with me. And truly, NPD is nothing without you all who watch these videos and support them. I'm incredibly grateful for that, and I just wanted to give you all a huge thank you. Now, back to the Christmas trees. First, we need to make a distinction between the US National Christmas Tree and the Capitol Christmas Tree, or the People's Tree. The National Christmas Tree is displayed at the White House. It's actually a permanent tree, like it's planted on the White House grounds and it lives there year-round. It's only just decorated at Christmas time. Like with other famous Christmas trees, there's also a lot of fanfare and pageantry around it. There's a lighting ceremony, the president is usually there, there's celebrities, the works, it's a whole thing. That tradition dates back to like the 1920s, but that's not what we're talking about here in this video. Even though the White House is part of the National Park System, and the National Park Service does play a role in interpreting the story of the National Christmas Tree, the subject of this video is the Capitol Christmas Tree, or the People's Tree, located, of course, at the National Capitol. The National Park Service isn't really involved here, but one of their counterparts among the federal land management agencies is the United States Forest Service. Since 1970, like I mentioned, a different national forest has supplied the Capitol Christmas Tree every single year. I mean, some forests have supplied more than one tree over the years, but like the chosen national forest changes every year. It's kind of like wherever the Super Bowl is hosted. And technically, the tradition of the Capitol Christmas Tree dates back to 1964. Then Speaker of the House John McCormick of Massachusetts suggested that a Christmas tree be planted at the Capitol. A 24-foot Douglas fir was purchased from Buddy's Nursery in Birdsboro, Pennsylvania at a cost of $700 and planted on the west lawn of the Capitol grounds. Originally, this tree did stay on the grounds year-round, much like the National Christmas Tree. But in 1968, wind and root damage caused the tree to be removed and replaced. Both the 1968 and 1969 trees were again sourced from private nurseries. Until 1970, when the Forest Service enters the picture, and the tradition of the People's Tree was born. Coincidentally, the first People's Tree was sourced from the Monongahela National Forest in West Virginia, just like this year's tree. The Monongahela also sourced the People's Tree for America's bicentennial in 1976. In terms of species, the People's Tree has been a spruce 37 times, a fir 21 times, and a pine only twice. Now, when you see the People's Tree, just as you can every single year for free during the holidays at the Capitol, you're seeing the finished product, right? You're seeing the tree all nice and decorated and lit up. It's like a giant version of the Christmas tree you might have at your house. What you don't see, though, is the years-long effort to get the People's Tree from some national forest in America to the Capitol grounds. That effort begins with the selection of the tree, like literally choosing which tree will be the People's Tree from many thousands of trees in a national forest. It's no easy task. That selection begins literally 1 year out. So while we're out here enjoying this year's tree on display at the Capitol, the Forest Service is already beginning the process for next year's tree. They start the process by selecting which national forest next year's tree will come from. Then they identify several species and areas in that forest that might be viable for the tree, and they mark those locations with a GPS. Sometime in June or July of the following year, the architect of the Capitol gets involved. The architect of the Capitol is, in general, the agency tasked with overseeing the Capitol grounds, but during the holiday season, they are the ones tasked with putting up the Capitol Christmas tree. So in June or July, somebody from the architect of the Capitol heads out to the selected national forest, and they start surveying and analyzing the candidate trees. They're looking for a tree that, well, looks like a Christmas tree. They're looking for the types of things you yourself might look for when selecting your own Christmas tree. Height, shape, fullness. You don't want any bald spots or dead spots. You can't hide those on a tree that's going to be displayed for all the public to see. You have to get a tree that's pretty much perfect, or as close to perfect as a tree can get. But the Capitol Christmas tree also has to have some special considerations. For one, it needs to be between 60 and 80 feet tall and about 25 feet wide. It's definitely not going to fit in your living room. But beyond that, there are environmental considerations to deal with as well. The harvesting of the Capitol Christmas tree actually requires an assessment under the National Environmental Policy Act, or NEPA, where the Forest Service is going to look at things like endangered species impacts, water quality impacts, what, if any, wildlife populations might be affected, and other things of that nature. In addition, remember that this tree has to be transported out of the forest, so it has to be in an area where a 102-foot flatbed truck can reach it. Most Capitol Christmas trees come from more developed areas of the forest for this very reason. These things have to be lifted by literal cranes, so there has to be an element of accessibility in this selection process. And from there, you're really just getting started, because now the journey back to the National Capitol begins. I mean, literally, the People's Tree might travel thousands of miles to get to Washington, D.C. In 2015, the People's Tree was even sourced from the Chugach National Forest in Alaska and had to travel by boat before going on a cross-country road trip to the nation's capital. Extra special care is taken in the transport of the tree because you don't want any of its branches to break off or become damaged to the point where the tree can't be put up for display. Usually, the tree goes on a sort of farewell tour also. It gets driven through several of the local communities where the tree is sourced from, and there are some festivities, celebration, things like that. This is part of the connection to public lands element of the People's Tree. It's a product of our public lands, and it literally touches the hands of countless people on its way to Washington. Foresters, truck drivers, volunteers, bureaucrats, politicians, etc. Taking it on this tour, showcasing the People's Tree to the people, is a way to tangibly connect this ultra-famous symbol of holiday cheer to our public lands heritage. Also, little kids from the state where the tree is sourced create the decorations that will ultimately adorn the tree at the Capitol, giving them a connection to our public lands as well. After the farewell tour, the People's Tree arrives in Washington, D.C. They dig a 4-foot hole in the ground, stick the tree in there, and fill it with concrete to make sure that this behemoth stays rooted right where it's at for the entire holiday season. It's then decorated with anywhere from between 4,000 and 5,000 LED lights, along with thousands more ornaments from those local children, before being lit for the first time in a ceremony hosted by the Speaker of the House. From there, the architect of the Capitol lights the People's Tree every single night through the end of the year. Not to mention, all of this takes place during a time of the year when it's known for being cold, windy, and rainy. There truly is an extraordinary amount of hard work and dedication put into getting the People's Tree ready each and every year. I've left some links in the description highlighting the various teams and people whose work makes this all possible, so feel free to check those out. After the holidays, the People's Tree is recycled, its products put back into the communities from which it came. For instance, the 2018 tree was recycled into several musical instruments, which were then distributed in the North Carolina communities from which the tree was harvested. So while we might typically associate public lands with benefits like recreation or conservation or historic preservation, the People's Tree also reminds us that public lands can serve to bring people together, to inspire joy, and to foster a sense of community. It's a symbol of the power of public lands and the beauty of our natural heritage. This is perhaps my favorite thing about it. The People's Tree truly is that, the People's Tree. It's also the only Christmas tree I get to enjoy because my cat will inevitably destroy anything even remotely resembling a Christmas tree if I put it up. Happy holidays, everyone. I hope you've enjoyed another year of National Park Diaries, and I hope you've had the opportunity to get out there and have some national park experiences for yourself. I've got some exciting things planned for 2024 here on the channel, and I can't wait to bring you all more stories from the world's protected places. Thank you again for another great year. Thank you for being here. Thank you for watching. Thank you for supporting my work. I'll see you in the new year. Goodbye.